Okay. So congratulations on such a compelling film, the three of you. Thank you for joining me for this conversation. Directors Taryn Gould, Danny Clinch, and Colleen Hennessy. So, I love this film a lot. I grew up listening to Blind Melon, mostly because of my older brother. So it wasn't something that I sought out. It was something that was kind of it would come into my environment when I was growing up. So I never really knew much about the band or Shannon. But I feel like this film is so creatively made that it's really accessible to anyone and people who've never heard about the film. Can you guys talk about the genesis of this film? Danny, I know that you knew Shannon from way back when he was touring. I actually noticed the second time I was watching the film that your name is actually kind of appears very briefly in there. So talk about, how the genesis of this came to be and how the three of you ended up connecting to make the film all these many years after his passing.
Yeah. I met the band on the MTV 120 Minutes tour. I was there photographing the band live, and Blind Melon was on the bill with Public Image Limited and Big Audio Dynamite. And those days I carried around a portfolio with me instead of my phone, and I shared my images with them, and we just kind of we connected and became fast friends. And they invited me in to do their publicity shoots and into the recording sessions. I went on tour with them, and I ended up actually playing harmonica with them a bunch of times, and we just became really fast friends. And I was in contact with Shannon when he was in rehab, and doing my best to support him. And when he passed away, of course, it was incredibly sad for everyone involved. And there was a long time afterwards, and I am still friends with the whole crew, and the extended crew of people, extended family. And um, you know, we just wasn't like we just jumped right into it. Like years later, um, Colleen and I were working together on a project, and we found out that we're both Blind Melon fans, and Colleen was saying, "Hey, if you ever decide to do a Blind Melon project, you can count on me to be a part of it."
Mhm.
And so we kind of, I was kind of excited about that, to have a partner who is just as excited about maybe doing something down the road. And so we decided to do it, and it was basically started. The origins was to just do a film about where the band was and where they were going, and they were getting a new singer. And this was many years after Shannon passed, and so as we were moving along, we discovered, I knew Shannon was filming a lot when I was around him, but we got a big box of tapes, of his moving image tapes, from his girlfriend Lisa and his daughter Nico, who was at that point now. Nico was, I don't know when we got, how old was Nico when we got the tapes, Colleen? Do you remember?
Sixth grade, she said. So I think she was about 12.
Oh my gosh. We've been working on this so long. Nico is now 24.
Wow.
Okay. And we got these tapes when she was like 12. Okay. So a labor of love, to say the least. And, um, and so when we got the tapes, we started looking through them. We realized how valuable they were and how incredible they were. And we were sharing them amongst us all. And Brad, the bass player in the band, had said, wow, these are interesting. How cool would it be to show the perspective from Shannon's point of view? There's so many great tapes of his. And right around the same time, or before, or maybe shortly after or before, we had brought Taryn on. Taryn and I met working on a project, and we became fast friends and started working on projects together and developing a great tandem uh, relationship in filmmaking, and loving the idea of not only the document but the artful sort of form of documentary making. And um, and so she came on and was beginning to work on the edit, and I'll let those guys take over from here, because I think that's their story to tell about that point where you guys got we all decide, there was a collective decision that maybe this was an interesting way to go.
Colleen, you want to start?
Sure. So then Taryn came on, and we decided to start again at the beginning of the tapes. And thankfully, Shannon was such a deliberate and complete archivist and documentarian, where everything was very well organized by day and oftentimes place. So we knew exactly where the first tape was, and we had a roadmap for where we were headed. So we just started at tape number 1 in 1990 and watched down all the footage. And throughout the process, you really have to make notes and sort of leave a trail of breadcrumbs to remind yourself what happened, how to get back to where those moments were, and just really make note of the themes that are emerging that you don't expect. You know, you sort of expect the trajectory of their career because we knew that story, but some of the more subtle themes about Shannon's filmmaking that emerged in the process, we took note of as they came up, like, oh, here's this repeating pattern of whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, it was mesmerizing to watch the tapes. So I think the goal for us was, how do we recreate in a condensed form like what it feels like to kind of just be moving through this strange, fragmented, yet at the same time really comprehensive, bizarre document over 5 years of this person's life. Like, how do we recreate that? And trying to pinpoint some of the things that were making us feel deeply, making us really connect to Shannon. And, you know, one of the very important existential points was that we all understood how the story ended, which is that, and that we had footage up until the very morning that, you know, Shannon passed away. So that we understood was a huge part of the kind of meaning that we were finding. I mean, there's just such an uncanniness when you're looking through someone's life and you sort of understand the shape of things, or you understand where the midpoints are, or, and so it's this strange, we decided that potentially a way that this film could work structurally was that if an audience understood how much time Shannon had, so they could experience the minutes that we're sharing with that understanding. So it kind of infuses it with a real significance and weight. And that we understood that if in the world of the film, you understood his timeline, that would really change your appreciation of his life passing and unfolding before you. And so that was where that idea was kind of born.
I thought that was actually, I was going to bring that up as a question, and that was something that I thought was just so smart in your editing, because, you know, you see that very first glimpse at the beginning of the end, and it creates this tension throughout as a viewer. You know that it's coming, and there's this countdown. But it's so interesting because in some ways the film is very chronological, but then you also include a lot of this collage type footage that Shannon got that was so beautiful. So it's sort of like these little like kaleidoscopic like interludes that, you know, enter into the film. And yeah, I thought that worked so well, because you obviously know what the end of the film is, but yet, you know, you're waiting for that scene, and there's just so much foreshadowing I found in the film. How much footage was there? I'm actually really curious, like how many hours are we talking about that you guys went through?
It was about 220 hours of video, and then about another 30 hours of interviews and micro cassette answering machine tapes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So there were certain things I was curious about, like a lot of the interviews that he had filmed. Was that just audio that he had collected, or was that he had actually videotaped himself, but obviously you guys overlaid different visuals on some of those interviews?
It was both. And I think the layers of his documentation were just so bizarre. I mean, so he's filming himself listening to his message machine. I mean, just the layers. So he, I guess, you know, the interviews were totally essential and foundational. And, you know, when we were trying to decide if we could pull this off, and really just tell it from like only with what Shannon recorded, you have to make all sorts of negotiations, and you have to sort of like understand that there might be things you have to leave out of the because it doesn't exist in the archive, and constantly trying to ask ourselves, well, is this worth it? And Shannon was just so diligent that mostly everything that we could have possibly wanted to include, he recorded an interview. And, you know, at later stages in this beautiful, you know, story that we've been telling, it's like we did receive these microcassettes that his partner Lisa had found, you know, in an attic that she kind of forgot about. And most of them were very sort of just like daily to day minutia about dentist appointments and lawn care. And then he had taken out the tape and at one point, and he had recorded this unbelievably useful interview. And I mean, we had a really emotional reaction because there was all this missing information, and it felt like he left it all for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I mean, I think it's so interesting that you guys had this, there was very much this purity to the film because it was, you know, Shannon is credited as one of the directors, and it is, I understand it's most of his footage. I think there was a little bit extra I noticed in the credits, but you know, why did you guys decide? Why was the decision made to not include, you know, anything outside of that scope?
I think we saw an opportunity to do something really unique, and it was just a big challenge for us. And I think, you know, the style of editing that's in there, if you look at a lot of the films that Taryn and I have worked on together, there's always these little artful flourishes in there, you know, these really soulful, like opening sequences and little surprises throughout. This was like almost a little surprise throughout the whole entire film. So it was really a challenge, and we did question it a lot. There was a lot of times where we questioned it, but again, we would find these little bits that Shannon left us that were you know, helping tell the story. And you know, you're watching the film and you get to a point and you're thinking like, okay, well, who's going to come on and give their kind of interpretation of the version of events, you know? And then you realize that nobody ever does. It's just Shannon or the band or whoever he's pointing the camera at. And the fact that he recorded all of his interviews kind of just tells where you're at in your life at that time and what you were thinking, because people are asking you pretty much the same questions. And then Shannon would just turn and talk to the camera, you know, and tell the information that the journalists don't ask, or the more intimate details of his life and things like that. And I just love the way the film was constructed, in the way that it kind of, you get to know him and you're introduced to him, and you see, you know, what kind of person he is, and you kind of really start to get to like him. And hey, I'm talking here. That's Sydney, by the way. And so anyway, Shannon, you start to get to like him, you get to know him, you see how funny he is, and he's fun to be around. And then you know, there's that turn where it starts to turn, and we start to see the dark side of what his life, part of his life. And I think it's at that point that you start to then notice again that there's a time code down there in the corner. And you start to look at it and you start to think like, oh, wow, he's got so much time left, and okay, this is getting bad. You know, it's, I love it for that reason. And I love it for the reason of, you know, that moment, which we call the glitch moment, which is almost like a beautiful edit of the tape that's disintegrating and starting to fall apart. And like those things to me, I believe, having known Shannon, that he would completely love this film. He would love the artfulness of it. He would love the way it was constructed, the attention to time and detail, because he gave us all this stuff, like the clock on the wall and the tour sheets, and asking people where they were and what day it was and all that sort of stuff. But we all just agree that maybe he would have liked a little more nudity in there, but that we weren't going to do that for him.
And I was going to add that, you know, a lot of times out of necessity, documentary film is like a past tense exercise, because something happens that you want to explore. And this was just this really unique opportunity to do a fully present tense immersion in, you know, first person. And I think especially because a lot of the content of the film ends up being a very raw exploration of of addiction and isolation, and to be able to try and explore that from the person's point of view who's experiencing it, no matter how many holes there are, because there are holes which in a way serve to illustrate even further how it feels and how disorienting addiction is. I mean, so it's like the camera fades down and then back up and there's time missing, and where did it go and what happened? And you know, you're, as someone experiencing watching a loved one go through that experience, it was also like that for us. Like, Shannon didn't always confess what was happening to the camera. Sometimes he would recreate evenings, and sometimes you would just see it in his face. And the kind of that process for us, and almost mourning the filming also of his deaths in a way, that from this completely, without having the projection, which can add tons of value to have people who had lived that experience from a far distance tell you about those experiences. There's a lot of value in that. But there's also a lot of projection and them filtering their experience, you know, through their eyes, and that we had this opportunity to just completely give the story in all of its joy and pain to Shannon and let everyone experience that.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if so during the film, there's a couple times where Shannon actually addresses the camera. I think at one point he says something like, "This is more for me than you." And I think he says "you" a couple times. Like so it's a bit eerie. It's almost as if he's like speaking to this future audience that he knows is going to be watching the film. But I was trying to figure out, like, was it like in the present day when he was filming it? Like, was it his mother? Was it Lisa? Like, who do you think that he was actually addressing?
It's a big question. You want to take it?
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot, and I think it changes, you know, depending on what he needed from his relationship with the camera. It shifted. It started off very much as a love letter to mom, you know, like, "Hey mom, here I am in Los Angeles." And then he's in the band, and then it becomes Ladies and Gentlemen, and he realizes maybe people would be interested in watching this at some point. And then other times it's a much more intimate relationship that he has. I think it changed. And even the reasons why he was filming too, we talk about, you know, those changing as well, you know, to have someone to talk to when no one else is around, you know, to have a buddy. And then at some point in the film, when things start really picking up and getting quick and No Rain kind of explodes, he tells a journalist he's filming to be able to go back later and process everything that was happening, because it happened so fast, you know. I mean, it was a slow burn. They toured for a long time on that first record, and then when it popped, it just exploded. So it was a way for him to kind of try to slow down time so he could go back and what is happening, you know.
Could have been talking to himself at some point as well, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also expresses at an interview that we came upon late in the process, was that he actually was saying this music thing is getting too serious, and feeling really kind of trapped and oppressed by it at a certain point. And then he said, "There's other things I have equal enthusiasm in doing." And the journalist asked what, and he said, I want to get into film. So that was actually an intention of his, and you see him evolve as a filmmaker. And then to that point of why was he filming, I think the thing for us and me also is just that I think the film asks a lot of interesting questions about why all of us are filming. I mean, I think you can see the various stages, the first early stages of this current moment of self-archiving and what it means for our experience in the world and the way we remember things and the way we are remembered. And it's this very early peak at the beginnings of the relationship with this technology. So that was important for us also. So those questions hanging about why he was filming, we wanted to leave open.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I think you guys mentioned this, and obviously it was very clear in the film, like, you know, Shannon is a super infectious person. He's so engaging. I think you guys really caught sort of this like dichotomy that he has in his personality, which is obviously, you know, someone that can be a real prankster and a partier, but also really like sensitive and emotionally tuned in for, especially for, you know, a guy that age, in the music scene that he was. So that was, you know, like that really touched me. But at the same time, he was also someone that obviously struggled with addiction and this darker side of things. You know, one thing that I was actually kind of curious to me was that in the footage, I was sort of expecting to see like more of these like party scenes and, you know, kind of more of like the signs of like, oh, the end is kind of clearly coming. And you know, that didn't appear. And I was curious if that was something like it was just never in the footage, or you guys consciously decided to not put that in the footage or in the film, I guess.
I can start with that, but a lot of, because it's totally first person, when Shannon was in the depths of his drug abuse, it's a lot of effort to lug a camera around and to charge it and to change tapes. And so he just wasn't filming. There was a confessional quality. And like I was saying a little bit before, you see so much happens outside of the frame. And then you can look for, you can see, like the one moment that I was just talking about earlier was that he was doing so well at Woodstock. The period of time around Woodstock, he had gone to rehab. He was in really good shape. And then the camera just cuts to black after that. And when you come up, you're in New Orleans and he doesn't need to say anything to you. You just see it in his face. So the gratuitousness of it, we didn't really have it. We didn't have to make that many decisions. So I don't know if you have more to add to that, Colleen. No.
Well, I do. I think also one of the things that it also shows is that addiction can be really lonely as well, and that it is not as romantic, you know, doing drugs and partying on the road as it seems. It's a lonely road, especially when you get to a place where it's like that's what's most important to you, you know. And it's hard because you know, that becomes what is most important, and everything else goes aside. And there's the time where he's sitting in the hotel room and he's obviously paranoid. You know, he thinks he's seeing people are waiting for him and looking for him, and you know, or you find that one person that you can, you know, that you can partner up with that is doing the same thing that you're doing. That's why you see maybe that one moment where he's with someone, and you know, maybe that's the guy that he gets high with, or whatever the case might be. And it's just not as romantic as it seems. I think, you know, I've heard stories and you know, certainly through the footage and stuff where it isn't a big, I mean, sometimes there's a party and sometimes there's a big, you know, thing going on where Shannon manages to cause some trouble and get arrested. But also, you know, a lot of times it's just a handful of people. So.
Or it's just lost time. It's the space in between the life that you're trying to live, you know. So in a way, like those spaces, those missed evenings, they speak louder. They ended up speaking a lot louder to me in my experience of watching through the footage than having some crazy party. Because we have a few of those scenes, but the saddest thing is when you just come up and you're like, oh my gosh, the addiction has gripped him again, and you can just see it in every part of his face and where he is.
Can you talk about, I'm glad that you guys got to premiere this film obviously in person, and you were able to share it, I believe, with the family too. I'm really curious, you know, how the family responded to the film when they saw this.
We took the film to Indiana. We took the rough cut first thing, and we offered it to his mother and father, and Lisa, his partner, his sister, and his daughter Nico. And his mother and father decided that they weren't quite ready to watch it, but they know that it's there available for them. And so we ended up sitting with his sister and Lisa, and then later with his sister Lisa and Nico. And yeah, it was one of the most special moments of all of our lives. for sure. And yeah, someone else, go ahead.
It was really, really emotional. I mean, for everyone. And there were moments where, there was a lot of tears and a lot of. I mean, we sat through the film with, Shannon's sister Anna and Nico and Lisa, his partner, and as you would imagine, it was emotional and. But the biggest gift for us was that Nico had felt like we had given her a gift. That was her comment. And nobody asked us to change anything in it, which we all found a big, big relief to us, because we felt like we were very honest with the film, and we didn't uh, sugarcoat any of it, and we felt like there might be some things where people would be uncomfortable, but as Taryn has pointed out in the past, that one of the things that was very, very moving to us was that Shannon's sister sort of understood her brother a little bit more, and she was, she saw things that she could finally let go of, and she saw things that I think that she was like, wow, I wish I could have done something differently there, as of course we would, but so it was very emotional.
Yeah, the I think the hope for us was that, like, the ending to this film was sad. It's a portrait, a very raw portrait of a person over 5 years of their life, and the ending is sad. But that hopefully there's a lot of power, which Colleen and I were just talking about this today, like the potential healing power of music, film, any sort of art form in general, but just that a film can even facilitate healing among a family. And so that, I guess, it gave us the hope and potentially the confidence that this film could offer clarity and insight and understanding beyond just his family and to others. And we were partnering with Music Cares, actually, I don't know if, which is an organization, Danny knows more about it, but it's like resources for people, musicians in particular, that are struggling with addiction and mental health issues. So
that's a great fit. Talk a bit about the band, just how I understand that they still are now playing, and or I guess they've come back together, and how did the band, I guess, see this? Like, were they a part of making this film at all? The rest of the band members?
You want to talk about Christopher? They were all very supportive and had similar reactions to the family, where they're able to finally have some perspective and create understanding around some of the emotions that happen in trauma and grief, and unravel some of that stuff and feel some relief. And again, that's just like such a beautiful service to be able to provide for someone, and I feel really grateful. And then as far as helping with the film, Taryn can speak to Christopher Thorne, the guitarist, helped us out a lot with the score.
Yeah, he was amazing with figuring out the other pieces of the score beyond just Blind Melon music, which is amazing. I now feel, I wasn't initially a fan, but I am now. But it's also very expensive. We can talk about that in another interview. But, so we were looking for other score pieces, also just for mood, and Christopher was a wonderful collaborator, and he scored some really key scenes, and I know that was very meaningful to him, and it was super meaningful to us. And then there's also a piece in there that is really beautiful by this composer, William Basinski, that is conceptually important to the film. It's the disintegration loops. So if you're a music fan, you'll see that piece in there, kind of a sort of supporting this idea of the tapes themselves were disintegrating, even as Shannon was filming them. So.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Well, so there's a scene in the middle where he is talking to Christopher, and Christopher says, "I thought you said your camera was broken." And he said, "Well, it's only when I play them back through here that the screen is breaking up." So there were these whole tapes where it was just, I mean, these like kaleidoscopic, unreal, almost like paintings of glitching going on. So yeah, it speaks to the futility in a way of even our attempts to kind of hold on to time and to archive our lives, and that even those things that we're trying to hold on to are also vulnerable to time. And
you guys did such an incredible job with it. I'm very thankful you guys put the film together. Is there anything else to add that maybe you guys didn't discuss? I know you'll be doing our archival footage panel, but yeah, anything, if there's anything else, otherwise, yeah, we can leave it at that. And
I have something that I'd like to say that from the beginning of working on this film, especially when Taryn came on board, like I think the idea for us is we want to present the film as not as a traditional sort of music documentary about Blind Melon, but it's a film that we believe stands up to, number one, repeated viewings because there's so much interesting information in there. And I think also a film that it's a filmmaker's film. It's somebody who loves and analyzes filmmaking and appreciates it. I think the editing job that was done on this film is incredible, and I think it's something that is really unique. And I think that you don't have to be a Blind Melon fan. You just have to appreciate humanity and artful filmmaking, and certainly if you love music, that's a bonus. And I hope that it helps people discover the music of Blind Melon, which has gotten completely overlooked. I think because of No Rain and because of having that hit was like actually maybe didn't work in their favor in the long run. So I think those are things that we hope people who love filmmaking pass it on to their other filmmaking friends or film loving friends, and they say, I know how you feel about Blind Melon, or maybe you don't care, or maybe you love them, but this film is worth seeing irregardless.
Thank you. That's a really great note to end on.
I have one thing to add as well.
One more adding.
I just wanted to explain currently where we're at. We got picked up by our wonderful friends over at Oscilloscope as distributors, and we released on June 26th through something called Virtual Cinemas, which actually came as a result of the situation that we're all in, this pandemic. And it's a really fantastic way to support your local record stores, music shops, music venues, theaters, all of these businesses that are struggling. 50% of the ticket sales go towards the businesses that partner up and offer streams. So it's a way to help each other out during this time, and we're just spreading the word. If anybody wants to partner, or like your favorite record store in your town could use a little boost, it's a great way to support each other.
Well, this is Canada though, so are we?
There are Canadian venues.
Yes.
We have two so far.
I wasn't sure. Great. Okay.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I hope any of the viewers watching this, please do share this and pass this on so that other folks can enjoy the film. Thank you so much, Taryn, Colleen, and Danny. This is such a pleasure. And if the audience, whoever's watching this, if you enjoy this, please check out the archival found footage panel that you guys will be taking part in, I believe, on Friday, July 24th. So thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you guys all again.